welcome back to the deep dive. Let me ask you a question right off the bat.
Oh boy.
Do you feel it?
Feel what exactly?
That creeping sense that the world has just gone a bit, well, soft?
Yeah.
That the institutions we used to trust, the ones built on granite and steel, have basically turned into something pliable, something fragile.
Right.
If you are a learner who looks at the state of the modern West and wonders, how do we get here? Or if you're looking to understand the history of our institutions before they were, frankly, captured by ideologies that seem to despise the very men who built them, you have absolutely found your home today.
We're going to places today that most mainstream history classes are just absolutely terrified to touch.
Completely terrified. Absolutely. Today is going to be ultra long. It is going to be incredibly incisive. And honestly, it is going to be fascinating.
We're really stripping away the varnish on this one.
We are. But before we launch into this, I have a mandatory mission for you, the listener. This is non-negotiable. Right now, hit that like and subscribe button. It supports the show, but more importantly, it helps us fight the algorithm.
Yeah, that algorithm is tough.
It is. And we need to get this kind of unfiltered, hard-hitting content out to more men who really need to hear it.
It's a small action for you, but in the context of the digital landscape we are operating in, it is a necessary strategic move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So do that now. Okay, today we are doing a comprehensive review of a truly explosive ebook.
Explosive is definitely the word.
It's called British Military Victories: Exceptionalism, Rigor, Genius, Strategy, and Grit. And that is by Conrad Riker.
Right.
And let me tell you, calling this a history book is like calling a tank a vehicle.
I mean, it technically is.
It technically is, yeah, but it completely misses the point.
No, this is not a textbook.
You-
Riker positions this text explicitly as a weapon.
A weapon against modern confusion.
Yes.
If you have ever felt like the red-pilled manosphere needs a manual, or if you are a men's rights activist looking for the receipts, the actual historical data on how we got to this point of cultural inversion, this is it.
It's essentially a guide to understanding how the West collapsed.
Because it abandoned what he calls the iron code of masculinity.
That is the core thesis right there. And we should be clear, we are going to be unpacking Riker's claims neutrally.
Right.
We're acting as the reporters here. We aren't endorsing the politics, but we are absolutely going to lay out his arguments exactly as he wrote them.
Because you need to hear what he's saying.
Exactly. Riker isn't just recounting battles for the sake of, nostalgia.
No.
He is arguing that Western civilization is in a state of freefall because we've traded discipline, hierarchy, and stoicism for therapy culture and forced equality.
Forced equality.
Yeah. He argues that the mechanisms that built the greatest empires in history have just been dismantled piece by piece.
It is really heavy stuff, and we are going to unpack every single layer of it today.
Every single
But seriously, I want you to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now, immediately, and buy this book.
It's definitely worth the read.
If you want to understand the history of these institutions before they were, in Riker's words, captured by feminists and Marxists, this is essential reading. Support the author.
And while you're at it, you should go follow Conrad Riker.
Yes, at Conrad Riker on Substack. He's doing the work that very few others are willing to do right now.
Very few.
Okay, let's dive in. Riker talks about this iron code. Set the stage for us. What exactly is the framework here?
Right. So the analytical framework Riker uses is heavily polemic.
Okay.
He is not trying to be balanced in the way a modern academic might be.
Where they constantly apologize for history.
Exactly. He has no time for that.
Yeah.
He's contrasting the brutal efficiency of the British Empire, and he goes even further back, actually, to the ancient Spartans.
Right, it's worth.
He contrasts all of that with what he calls today's gynocentric and therapeutic military culture.
China.
Yeah. Centered on the female perspective or female comfort. His argument is that victory isn't accidental.
You don't just stumble into an empire.
Exactly. Victory is coded masculine.
Meaning you can't just look into winning a war. It requires a specific mindset.
That's his claim. Riker argues that this code involves the deliberate suppression of emotion to prioritize the mission.
Suppression. Okay.
He treats modern concepts like toxic masculinity not as valid psychological critiques.
Which is how they're normally presented.
Right. But he treats them as a psyop.
Psyop. Wow.
He argues the term itself is a weapon intended to disarm men, to pathologize the very traits that are necessary for survival and defense.
That is a massive claim. And I know a lot of our listeners are really going to resonate with that perspective.
It's foundational to his entire book.
So where does he start? If we are talking about the foundation of this iron code, Where are we looking first?
He takes us all the way back to the absolute source. Section 1 of our discussion today is the Iron Code and the Forge of Sparta.
The Spartans, I mean, everyone loves the movie 300. We all know the aesthetic.
Sure.
But Riker goes really deep into the actual training via Ghost.
He does. And he does it specifically to highlight the contrast.
The contrast with today.
Yes. He compares modern training, which he views as hopelessly softened, to the Spartanagoge. And the details he pulls out from the historical record are just visceral.
Let's hear them.
We are talking about boys taken from their homes at age 7.
7 years old.
7.
I mean, my nephew is 7. He is literally playing Minecraft right now.
Right. And these Spartan boys were ripped from their mothers.
Just taken.
Riker argues this wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was a calculated necessity.
How so?
Sparta operated on the belief that maternal softness breeds fragility.
Wow.
If you want a warrior, he says, you cannot let him be coddled. So the state raised them, and they slept on reed beds that they had to harvest themselves.
Harvest from where?
From the Eurotas River.
And when you say harvest, I mean with their bare hands?
No knives. No knives. No tools. Riker describes them tearing these rigid stalks out of the riverbed, their hands bleeding in the freezing water.
That was their bed.
That was their bed. And they were given one cloak.
One cloak for what? A season?
One for the entire year.
The whole year?
Winter, summer, it simply didn't matter. No blankets.
It is unimaginable today.
And here is a detail that really sets the tone for Riker's argument regarding morality versus survival.
Okay.
They were actively encouraged to steal food.
Steal food. But isn't that usually strictly against the rules in any kind of military structure?
In the modern world, absolutely. But in Sparta, they were kept intentionally underfed,
So they were starving.
constantly hungry. Riker explains that this forced them to develop cunning, stealth, initiative. They had to steal just to survive.
Okay, but what if they got caught?
This is the crucial part. If they were caught, they were whipped.
So they were punished for stealing.
No. They were whipped for the incompetence of getting caught. The moral act of stealing wasn't the issue at all. The tactical failure of detection was the crime.
That is a massive distinction. So the lesson is competence above morality, results above feelings.
Precisely. Riker argues Sparta didn't fear trauma. They weaponized it.
Weaponized trauma.
They understood that trauma, when it's properly channeled, creates resilience. They didn't have safe spaces.
Right. No guidance counselors in Sparta.
None. They had the Syssitia, the warrior mess.
And what happened there?
In that mess, if you were a weak man, if you showed fear, you weren't counseled. You were shamed. You were socially exiled.
It is such a stark contrast to today, where we are taught to validate literally everyone's lived experience.
It's the exact opposite. Riker actually quotes a Roman senator observing these Spartan boys.
Which senator?
Scipio Aemilianus. He visited Sparta centuries later when the Romans were rising to power.
And what did he see?
He observed these boys running barefoot over broken pottery.
Broken pottery.
Feet shredded, blood everywhere, and the silence was absolute.
No crime.
None. And Scipio said, quote, "These men do not fear pain. They fear weakness more."
They fear weakness more.
That is the fundamental disconnect Riker identifies between the ancient world and the modern therapeutic world.
We fear pain.
And they feared being less than men.
And Riker connects this ancient mindset directly to modern special forces, doesn't he?
He does.
It's not just ancient history. He brings the receipts from modern psychology, too.
Yes. He analyzes a really fascinating study in the book regarding the SAS and the U.S. Marines.
The absolute elite.
Right. And the study found that high performers, the Tier 1 operators, score incredibly high in emotional regulation.
Which, in this context, is a fancy word for suppression.
Exactly. It means the ability to box it up and put it away.
Just shut it down.
Right. Riker argues that the modern push for emotional expression is basically counter-evolutionary for a warrior.
It goes against their design.
He has this one quote that really stood out. "Therapy turns warriors into patients."
Therapy turns warriors into patients.
He argues that talking doesn't heal. Action heals. Rest heals. Brotherhood heals.
But sitting in a circle discussing your feelings.
He views that as actively dismantling the warrior psyche, turning a predator into a victim.
Wow. He even brings up the cryptia in this context, which sounds honestly terrifying.
It was entirely intended to be terrifying.
What was it?
The cryptia was a rite of passage. The most promising Spartan graduates, teenagers essentially, were sent out into the countryside.
With what?
Nothing but a knife. And their mission was to hunt helots.
The helots were the slave class.
Yes. But specifically, they were instructed to hunt the strongest, most rebellious helots.
The ones who posed a threat.
Right. Riker uses this historical reality to illustrate the necessity of decisive violence.
Decisive violence.
This wasn't a police action. It wasn't an arrest. It was a call.
A call.
He contrasts this teenage assassination squad with modern cadet programs today that teach conflict resolution
And de-escalation.
Exactly.
From hunting insurgents to conflict resolution workshops, that is quite the shift in educational priorities.
And Riker argues that shift is fatal. He firmly believes we are training the killer instinct out of the very people we need to protect us.
We are domesticating our own sheepdogs.
That is exactly his point.
Okay, let's move forward in history to the British Empire. This is section 2 of his book, The Discipline of Empire versus Modern Wellness.
Right.
Now, Riker argues here that boredom was actually a weapon. That sounds incredibly counterintuitive.
It sounds strange, but it connects to this idea of the discipline of empire.
Okay.
We often think of war as this high adrenaline, chaotic, passionate event.
Running and screaming.
Right. But Riker discusses the British Army's musket drills around 1804.
The redcoats.
Yes. He notes that a British soldier would perform 10,000 repetitions of the loading sequence before ever seeing battle.
10,000 reps.
10,000!
That is mind-numbing.
That is exactly the point. Riker argues the British didn't win because they were inherently braver than the French or the Russians.
They weren't just morally superior heroes.
No, they won because they were machines. He says, quote, "Hesitation is entropy. Action is order.
Hesitation is entropy.
If you have done the drill 10,000 times, you literally do not have to think when the cannon fire starts.
Muscle memory takes over.
You don't process the fear, your hands just move. You become the weapon."
And he uses the example of the thin red line to prove this right. The Highlanders. This is a legendary moment.
The 93rd Highlanders at the Battle of Balaclava. It's iconic.
Set the scene for us.
They stood just too deep against a massive Russian cavalry charge.
2 ranks deep against heavy cavalry.
Conventional military wisdom says you form a dense square to resist cavalry.
Right, to stop the horses breaking through.
They didn't do that. They just stood in a thin line.
And they didn't break.
They didn't flinch. And Riker argues they stood still, not out of some burst of patriotic heroism, but out of absolute boredom and drill.
Boredom.
They had stood in line so many times on the parade ground that the battle was just what they did.
It was just another Tuesday.
Exactly. The routine overrode the terror.
And the statistics actually back this up.
They do. Riker cites that British desertion rates were the lowest in Europe at the time,
What was the number?
3.2%.
That's incredibly low for the 19th century.
Because the system utilized routine to bypass fear, it attacked weakness by simply removing the option to think about it.
But now, Riker says we've lost those standards entirely. We've replaced drill with dialogue.
He calls it the decline of training standards. He points to a massive shift in language,
From luck to what?
from dominating the enemy to managing conflict.
Managing conflict.
He cites a RAND Corporation study claiming that replacing live fire drills with emotional intelligence training in the U.S. Army is linked to a 22% drop in combat readiness.
22%.
Yes.
That is massive. That is the difference between winning and losing a skirmish.
It is life and death. And he mentions a specific, almost unbelievable example of the British Army reducing drill time by 40%.
40% reduction in drill time. For what?
To accommodate individual learning styles.
You're kidding me. Individual learning styles in boot camp? Excuse me, Sergeant. I'm a visual learner. Can we slow this down?
That is exactly Riker's critique. He says this is weakness masked as concern.
Driven by who?
Driven largely by feminist NGOs, who he claims have infiltrated the chain of command.
Infiltrated the brass.
Yes. He highlights the ideological shift in military terms, moving away from words like destroy towards like engage or facilitate.
Facilitate.
Yeah.
Imagine facilitating the enemy into the afterlife. It just doesn't have the same ring to it.
Riker would say it lacks the same lethality, and lethality is the only metric that actually matters in war.
Right. If you aren't lethal, you lose. Now this brings us to section 3 of the book. Brotherhood in the trenches versus diversity.
This is where it's really heated.
This is where Riker really challenges the modern narrative regarding mixed gender units. Riker talks about the silence of men.
Yes. He uses the account of the Falklands War to illustrate this. Specifically, 3 PRA at Mount Longdon.
The paratroopers.
Right. He describes a patrol moving through peat bogs in the freezing dark for 90 minutes.
Okay.
Absolute silence under heavy fire.
And he thinks that silence is biological, that it's an inherently male trait.
He argues it is firmly biological. He brings up the argument involving vasopressin versus oxytocin.
Break that down for us.
Now, this is scientific, but Riker applies it tactically. He claims men bond through vasopressin.
Which does what?
It's a hormone linked to loyalty, aggression, and shared hardship.
Okay.
Women, generally speaking, bond through oxytocin, which drives verbal bonding, communication, and comforting behaviors.
So men bond by doing and struggling, women bond by talking and comforting.
Roughly, yes. That's the baseline of his argument. And Riker argues that in a combat scenario, talking is death.
Silence is survival.
Exactly. He cites a book mentioning 2015 integration trials where female soldiers required 23% more verbal coordination to do the exact same tasks as the all-male control groups.
23% more talking.
Yes. Riker posits that homogeneity, all men, creates speed.
Because they don't need to over-communicate.
You don't need to talk, you just know what the guy next to you is going to do. Mixed gender units create hesitation because of that chatter factor.
The chatter factor.
Yeah.
And the cost of this inclusion, according to Riker. Because we are always told by the media that diversity is our greatest strength.
Riker argues diversity is a chaotic variable in combat. He cites a 2018 NORAD study showing mixed gender units had a 41% drop in cohesion.
41% drop.
Yes.
That is nearly half the unit's effectiveness just gone, vanished.
That's the figure he presents in the text. He then introduces this concept he calls the emotional load.
What's the emotional load?
The idea is that men biologically prioritize protecting women.
Right.
It is evolutionary hardwiring. If you put a woman in a combat unit, the men stop focusing purely on the mission.
And they start focusing on her.
Subconsciously or consciously, they focus on protecting the asset, as he calls it.
He gives some specific case studies on this too, doesn't he? It's not just theory.
No, he points to real-world data. He points to Norway between 2014 and 2017.
What happened there?
He claims injury rates rose 58% in their mixed special ops units.
58% increase in injury.
Yes. And he also mentions the HMS Queen Elizabeth in 2019.
The aircraft carrier.
Right. He claims sailors on that ship spent more time discussing boundaries and interpersonal conflict than they did battle stations.
They're navigating relationships instead of navigating the ship.
That's his exact critique.
So Riker's conclusion on this is pretty stark.
Quote, "You can't democratize combat."
You can't democratize combat.
He views the push for inclusion not as progress, but as a total surrender to ideology. He believes we are sacrificing our combat effectiveness on the altar of political correctness.
Which leads us perfectly into how history handles all of this. Because if the present is being rewritten by these ideologies, so is the past.
Absolutely.
Section 4 is called The Death of the Hero and the Media War. And Riker really goes after a massive historical figure here, Florence Nightingale.
He does. He completely tears into that narrative. He calls the modern story around her epistemic vandalism.
Unpack that term for the listener. Epistemic vandalism.
Epistemology is the study of knowledge. So epistemic vandalism means intentionally destroying knowledge.
Defacing history.
Exactly. He's critiquing the entire Nightingale myth.
Because we are all taught she was the angel of the Crimea, the lady with the lamp.
Right. But Riker claims she was essentially a hospital administrator sitting 300 miles away from the front lines.
300 miles away.
Yes. Meanwhile, male surgeons like James Miller were actually amputating limbs in the mud.
On the front lines.
Working 72-hour shifts, absolutely covered in blood and filth.
But we all know the lady with the lamp. Why?
Riker argues that is the entire problem. He cites a really telling statistic.
Let's hear it.
94% of modern textbooks mention Nightingale, but only 7% mention any male medics from that same conflict.
7%.
He calls this sentimental gynocentrism.
Gynocentrism. Centering everything on the female experience, even in a war fought by men.
Exactly. He argues this actively erases male sacrifice just to elevate a female figure.
It distorts reality to fit a modern political narrative.
And he notes the supreme irony here.
What's the iron?
Nightingale herself vehemently opposed having female nurses near the battlefields.
Wait, really?
Yes, because she thought they would be a distraction to the men.
That is incredibly ironic. The pioneer of female nursing didn't want women on the front lines.
Exactly. And he extends this rewriting of history to another massive figure, Winston Churchill.
They loved going after Churchill.
Riker argues modern education now teaches Churchill as a racist colonial oppressor rather than the savior of the free world.
He attacks the label problematic.
Right. Yes. He calls problematic a linguistic black hole used to delete male heroes.
A linguistic black hole.
Because if you can find one flaw, you delete the entire man. You suck his entire legacy into that black hole.
And Netflix gets a beating here, too, in his book.
Riker critiques the whole male gaze theory in media and flips it. He looks at modern shows like Blackadder, The Crown, or the movie Darkest Hour.
Very popular shows.
Right, but he argues they rewrite history to make male heroes look fundamentally broken.
How so in Darkest Hour?
He points out that Darkest Hour shows Churchill needing a literal therapy session with his wife to function.
Doubting himself.
Yes, needing her emotional reassurance to make a decision.
And Riker says
the real Churchill didn't need therapy. He needed whiskey and resolve.
Right.
He didn't ask his wife for permission to lead the British Empire.
And the cost of this cultural shift. Why does it matter to us today if Netflix gets a historical movie wrong?
Because culture is upstream of everything.
Right.
Riker argues boys today are being raised entirely without models of burden bearing.
Burden bearing.
If every historical hero is portrayed as emotionally broken or secretly toxic, boys have absolutely no template for masculine strength.
They have nothing to look up to.
Which leads to a generation that simply cannot lead because they believe leadership itself is morally suspect.
Which is a perfect segue to Section 5, Churchill's resolve and the alone leader. Because Churchill really was alone in May 1940.
He was completely isolated. This is what Riker calls the anti-consensus model.
Okay.
He focuses heavily on May 1940. The War Cabinet wanted to negotiate with Hitler. The military expert said Britain was finished.
So what did Churchill do?
He didn't poll the public. He didn't seek consensus. He just decided.
He didn't run focus groups. He didn't check what Twitter would think.
Exactly. Riker completely attacks the modern myth of the collaborative genius.
Because in corporate culture today, we love to say leadership is about listening.
Yes, servant leadership. Riker says that's nonsense. Sometimes leadership is about ignoring literally everyone.
Churchill worked in isolation.
He skipped chains of command entirely, and he flat out ignored the experts when they told him to negotiate a peace treaty.
There is that famous quote Riker uses, "I am the king's first minister, not his clerk."
That's the quote. Riker highlights Churchill's refusal to negotiate with Hitler, specifically standing against Lord Halifax as a pure act of will.
Not logic.
Not logic at all. Logic said surrender. Logic said cut a deal and save what you can. Will said fight.
And Riker argues that masculinity is about the imposition of will over circumstance.
Exactly.
And his marriage. Riker has a very specific take on that dynamic that contradicts the movie version we just talked about.
He views Clementine Churchill not as a partner in the modern egalitarian 50-50 sense.
But as what?
As a pillar. The dynamic was man as leader, woman as pillar.
Man as leader, woman as pillar.
Riker argues her role supported his burden bearing rather than sharing it.
He wasn't dumping his emotional baggage on her.
No. She was the structural support that allowed him to stand tall and carry the weight of the empire.
Very interesting perspective. So, moving from political will to naval audacity. Section 6, Nelson's Gambit and the Spirit of Audacity.
Horatio Nelson. The Battle of the Nile at Aboukir Bay.
This is where Nelson famously broke all the rules.
He attacked at night, which was completely against naval doctrine at the time.
You just didn't do that.
Never. And he sailed his ship straight into the French line, risking running his entire fleet aground in the dark.
And Riker calls this excessive initiative.
Excessive initiative.
I feel like you would get written up for that in a modern HR performance review. Captain Nelson, your initiative was excessive. It made the team feel unsafe.
You absolutely would be fired today. Riker contrasts Nelson's promotion for breaking those rules with modern military officers being flagged for disrupting command cohesion.
Because they stepped out of line.
He argues we have systematized mediocrity.
Systematized mediocrity. He calls it bureaucratic rot. Right.
Yes. He describes the modern military as being infected with gynocentric pacifism.
There's that word again.
He claims officers today fear HR complaints far more than they fear actual military defeat.
We are more afraid of a lawsuit than a lost battle.
Exactly. The bureaucracy is the real enemy.
And he mentions the Type 45 destroyers as an example of this rot.
Yes. The massive breakdown of modern British ships.
What does happen with them?
They had chronic engine failures in warm waters. Riker contrasts those modern failures, which he labels incompetence masked as innovation, versus the reliability of Nelson's wooden fleet.
Nelson's ships worked.
Nelson's ships worked because the men worked. The standards were ruthless.
And the modern ships.
The modern ships fail because the system that built them is focused on diversity quotas and crew comfort, rather than pure engineering rigor.
So we have a military besieged by its own bureaucracy. This brings us to Section 7, the feminist siege of the military.
This is a very controversial section.
Extremely. Riker cites a specific incident at Sandhurst in 2022.
This story really encapsulates his entire frustration.
Tell the listener what happened,
A female cadet failed the standard endurance test.
which is a grueling test.
Very. And in the past, a fail is a fail. You go home.
Right.
But Riker claims she ended up passing due to a well-being review.
A well-being review for a combat endurance test.
Well, I failed the 5-mile run with a heavy pack, but my emotional well-being is quite high today. Essentially, yes. The argument made was that failing her would be detrimental to her mental health, and it would hurt the Academy's diversity targets.
So the standard was just waived.
Riker says this is the absolute end of standards.
Right.
His point is, once you waive the standard for one protected group, the standard objectively no longer exists.
It's just a suggestion at that point.
Exactly. And this leads directly into the policing of language that he criticizes.
The shift from traditional terms.
Right. Moving away from men of war to service personnel.
Or changing man overboard to person overboard.
Person overboard. Riker calls this neutering identity.
Neutering identity. That is a strong phrase.
He doesn't hold back, and he mentions a specific anecdote about recruits at Catterick.
What were they doing?
They were ordered to sew pronoun badges onto their uniforms instead of rank insignia.
Pronoun badges on a combat uniform. I can practically hear the listeners groaning right now.
Riker is absolutely furious about it in the text. He asks, quite bluntly, how does a pronoun badge help you kill the enemy?
It doesn't.
He heavily defends the all-male nature of the SAS specifically in this context.
Because they have resisted a lot of this.
His quote on this is brilliant. Nature doesn't care about your pronouns.
Nature doesn't care.
Gravity, hypothermia, bullets, they treat everyone exactly the same.
They're the ultimate equalizers.
Right. If you lower standards to include people who literally cannot meet the physical reality of combat, nature will correct you in the harshest way possible.
Men will die.
People will die.
Riker seems to think the very concept of toxic masculinity is the real enemy here. Which brings us to Section 8, the myth of toxic masculinity.
He completely reframes these so-called toxic traits.
Traits like stoicism, dominance, aggression.
Right. Modern psychology calls them toxic. He argues these are survival traits, not pathologies.
Because without them, you are defenseless.
Exactly. Without aggression, you literally cannot defend a border. Without dominance, you cannot deter a predator.
He goes specifically after the APA guidelines, doesn't he?
The American Psychological Association, yes. Their 2019 guidelines that officially labeled traditional masculinity as psychologically harmful.
Harmful.
Riker claims these guidelines were written by people who have never faced actual risk in their lives.
Academics.
By academics sitting in ivory towers who have never had to physically protect a family or defend a nation.
And he actually has a medical study to back up his defense of stoicism, doesn't he?
He does. A study from JAMA Psychiatry in 2022.
What did it find?
It claims that elite troops who suppress emotion actually have lower PTSD rates.
Lower. But that contradicts literally everything we are told today. We are told constantly that if you suppress your feelings, you will eventually explode.
Riker argues that is a civilian myth. The study suggests that compartmentalization, boxing it up, is a healthy, adaptive mechanism for high-stress environments.
It works.
It works. Riker argues again, talking doesn't heal. Action does. He firmly believes that suppression is a vital tool for survival, not a sign of mental illness.
And he brings up the man-up incident to show how this is being punished.
Right. A British sergeant was officially reprimanded for telling a struggling recruit to man up.
Man up, 2 words.
Riker views this reprimand as literally criminalizing leadership.
How so?
Because if you can't tell a soldier to be a man, to tap into those deep reserves of masculine strength and stoicism, you cannot make him a soldier.
You leave him vulnerable.
You are leaving him completely defenseless against his own fear.
This all culminates in Section 9, the Falklands, the Last Stand. Riker calls this the last stand of the old order.
The last time the Iron Code was fully deployed, he talks about the Yompers
3 Commando Brigade.
marching across East Falkland. 56 miles across frozen bogs,
In negative 30 degrees Celsius.
carrying 100-pound packs on their backs.
No therapy sessions out there, no well-being reviews on the march.
Just absolute grit. And he highlights Colonel H. Jones at Goose Green,
What did he do?
leading from the absolute front, charging a dug-in machine gun nest single-handedly, dying to break the enemy line.
Ultimate sacrifice.
Riker contrasts this pure warrior ethos with modern risk-averse command,
Where the priority is what?
where the priority is avoiding bad press and managing liability. H. Jones didn't care about the press. He cared about the objective.
And Margaret Thatcher. Riker seems to have an immense amount of respect for her leadership here.
He praises Thatcher for governing, in his words, like a man.
Like a man.
And he means that as the absolute highest compliment. Resolute. No apologies, no focus groups.
She has acted.
She saw sovereign territory was invaded, and she immediately sent the fleet.
Riker contrasts her with modern male leaders, doesn't he?
Yes, leaders who constantly apologize for their own history and existence.
He has a phrase for the modern military.
Uh,
An NGO with rifles.
yes. He says the Falklands was the last time the military actually acted like a military.
A force for destruction and reclamation.
Exactly. Before it became an NGO with rifles, obsessed with peacekeeping operations, diversity, and humanitarian aid rather than warfighting.
Wow. Okay, section 10. The cult of vulnerability and the economics of manhood. This is where he connects the military decline to the broader economic decline.
Right. He talks about the therapy trap.
The therapy trap.
The theory that this modern push for emotional authenticity is actually a Trojan horse for weakness.
He calls it the Prince Harry effect.
It's the perfect contrast. He contrasts Prince Harry selling his trauma for Netflix deals and constantly venting his grievances
Versus who?
versus his grandfather, Prince Philip's silence and sense of duty.
Right.
Philip walked 2 steps behind the Queen for decades. He fought in World War II, and he never complained publicly.
Never.
Riker points out the operational impact of this shift away from stoicism. He notes that military units with mandatory therapy sessions actually saw a 27% drop in operational readiness.
27%. So talking about it makes him less ready to fight.
That's what the data he cites suggests.
And the economic shift. How does this tie into the broader economy?
He looks at the shift from industries like steel and coal mining.
Which are heavily male-coded, stoic, dangerous industries.
Right. He notes the shift from that to the modern gig economy and care work.
Which are female-coded and highly emotional.
Exactly.
He has a very specific story about a Royal Navy engineer here that illustrates this perfectly.
Yes. An engineer who was denied a promotion specifically to fit a female narrative.
What does that mean?
He was flat out told that the Navy needed to promote a woman into that specific role for the optics, to meet a diversity quota.
So what did he do?
He left. He quit the military and started a private company building steel staircases.
Building steel staircases.
Riker uses this to link diversity spending directly to the collapse of British manufacturing and competence.
Because you drive the competent men away.
Productivity drops massively when you prioritize a political narrative over technical competence.
Right.
When you alienate the men who actually build and fix things, your infrastructure literally crumbles.
Which we are seeing today. Finally, section 11. War as rite of passage and the logic of hierarchy. Why does Riker think hierarchy is so absolutely essential? Because we live in a democratic age where hierarchy is viewed as oppressive.
Riker's counter to that is, quote, in chaos, hierarchy is oxygen.
In chaos, hierarchy is oxygen. I love that.
He argues that democracy and egalitarianism are luxuries of peace.
Luxuries.
But in war, you need a dictator.
Yeah.
You need a clear chain of command. He cites a Dutch military unit operating in Mali.
What happened with them?
They tried to lead by consensus. They were literally voting on which patrol routes to take.
Voting in a war zone.
Yes, and it got men killed because consensus creates hesitation.
And hesitation is entropy.
Exactly.
I also touches on the lack of initiation for boys in modern society.
Yes. He links the lack of hard initiation, things like tough rugby, boxing, getting into physical fights.
The things boys used to do.
Right. He links the removal of those things to the absolute explosion of ADHD diagnoses in young boys today.
Interesting.
He argues that boys have a natural, kinetic, aggressive energy that used to be channeled into physical discipline and brotherhood.
And now?
Now, because we view that energy as toxic, we just drug it out of them.
We medicate them.
Without a physical outlet and a proper masculine rite of passage, that energy either turns inward as anxiety or becomes entirely destructive.
And lastly, he defends military chaplains. which is surprising in such a brutal book.
He calls it faith under fire. He argues that religious faith acts as strength amplification.
Strength amplification.
He cites statistics showing significantly lower PTSD rates in religious soldiers.
Why is that?
For Riker, it's not actually about the specific theology, it's about the tactical utility of believing in something bigger than yourself.
Right.
If you truly believe your soul is safe, you are far more willing to risk your physical body.
You become fearless.
But if you believe this material life is absolutely all there is, you naturally become risk averse. You hesitate.
Wow. Okay, let's step back and unpack all of this. We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
This book, British Military Victories by Conrad Riker, it is clearly not just a history lesson. It is a direct challenge to the modern listener.
It absolutely is. It views history not as a steady progression toward equality and enlightenment, but as a tragic slide into decadence and weakness.
And the central challenge of the book really is this idea you don't need permission to be strong.
Exactly. The modern world will constantly tell you that your masculine strength is toxic. Riker is telling you it is literally the only thing that saves civilization.
If you are listening to this right now and you are feeling that fire, you need to support this show.
Definitely.
Like and subscribe right now. We need the numbers to keep this kind of deep, unfiltered content going. And seriously, go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and buy British Military Victories by Conrad Riker.
It will change how you view history.
Read it. Understand the mechanics of it. Give it to your sons. And be sure to follow him at Conrad Riker on Substack.
His essays on there are fantastic.
This is for the learner who wants the truth,
Yeah.
however harsh or uncomfortable it might be.
If I can leave the listener with a final provocative thought directly from the source material,
Please do.
Riker writes, civilizations don't fall because of bad decisions. They fall because men stop obeying good ones.
Civilizations fall because men stop obeying good ones. That is incredibly powerful.
It really raises a terrifying question for all of us today. Is the softness and comfort of modern life actually a massive danger in disguise?
Are we just comfortable or are we completely defenseless?
Exactly.
That is definitely something to mull over. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
A pleasure as always.